name is Shaun, and I love to talk about movies way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comment section. Share your ranking of Edgar Wright's films. My list isn't the right list, it's just my list, and I would love to see yours. As we go into this, Edgar Wright has actually directed 2 other movies that I didn't include in my list. One of them was an independent project he did before Shaun of the Dead. The other one was a documentary that he actually did this year, and I didn't have time to get them watched, and they also feel kind of weird to include in this list because one of them had such a small budget, and the other one is, well, a documentary. So I didn't include them. Go ahead and include them in your list if you've seen them, and let's get started. Coming in last place is Last Night in Soho, and as a point of reference, I did give this movie a positive review. Thus, I think all of his movies are good. And what was really cool about this movie is that it fully demonstrated that Edgar Wright is not a one-trick pony. This movie does not use his usual bag of tricks. It's not a comedy. It's not like fun and fast-paced. It does a bunch of new and different things, but still has all of his talent on display, especially as you start going into all the kind of the dream sequences and the visions that she's having, the way that he visualized the girl going into that world, and it cuts back and forth. It's all masterfully done. It's all interesting to look at. It has a great color scheme in all of it. And just in general, the movie combines a bunch of kind of familiar types of plots together into something fresh and new. Now, the reason it's at the bottom of the list, part of that is just a matter of taste. As much as I respected the film and I thought it was good, it's not a movie that I imagine that I'll just kind of rewatch a lot on my own. The other thing here is, as fresh and creative as the first 2 acts of this film were, when it started getting to the category of answering questions and providing the conclusion and payoff to everything, it got a lot more conventional, and it started to feel like this is stuff that I could have come up with versus everything in the first half that I was like, wow, this is so interesting the way you combined all this stuff together. But still, this is a good movie with a lot to offer, just not the best ending and not exactly to my tastes. In 5th place, The World's End, the concluding chapter of the Cornetto trilogy, and I would say the weakest of the 3 films, but still a lot of fun, as well as kind of having some nice emotion to it. For me, I felt this movie worked best when it was this story about these old high school friends catching up, and one of them is on a totally different page from the others, and that to me kind of resonated on a lot of levels. Some of that is the fact that I turned 40 in less than a month, so I'm kind of in that stage of life where there's friends that I haven't seen in a while, and sometimes you try and play catch up with them, and you just kind of get nostalgic for the past, but you're also thinking about the future. So just in general, on that level, the movie touched on a lot of notes and pulled at my heartstrings just a little bit. But when it comes to the actual end of the world, body snatchers kind of plot line, I didn't think that was quite as good as the other 2 films in the Cornetto trilogy, where it felt like those films did a really nice job of kind of telling the personal story and combining it with some of these genres, action movie, zombie movie, and I don't think this one incorporated them nearly as well. I mean, as you kind of track along with the movie for 30 minutes and it's one thing, and it just feels like we switched genres and it's competing with itself, whether it's about their friendship from the past and moving forward, or whether it's about the end of the world and people being snatched. And then even as it kind of goes into parts of it where it talks about people being turned into mulch and things like that, for the sake of a quick joke, I think it kind of, when you're trying to make a story that has very human emotions on one level, and then you do something that violent and crass in regards to characters that we've been introduced to, it feels a little bit like it rings hollow when you do something like that. So I just didn't think this one worked quite as well on the invasion of the body snatchers plotline to it, but I actually enjoyed the camaraderie of the group and the idea of catching up years later quite a bit, and I almost wish that's all this movie had been and not tried to have the clever genre twist to it. Next up, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, and I love that this movie exists with the budget that it was given. It feels like it's the type of movie that would get like $20 million. It would be kind of like a little indie darling film that wasn't meant to make a ton of money, except they gave this film an $85 million budget, and Edgar Wright took all of that money and you see it on the screen because every single shot is meticulously crafted with all of the visual onomatopoeia, all of the transitions. Everything is done in a way to capture the aesthetic and vibe that he wanted. And it is something unlike any other film that has ever existed, where it combines a story with the graphic novel comic book look to it, while also playing into this video game aesthetic, and it mashes them together absolutely perfectly. It is seamless the way that he was able to bring this story to life in such a creative and interesting fashion that it's just bizarre that a studio actually gave him the budget to pull this film off the way that he did. Whether you're talking about just the fight choreography, these just bizarre, weird band sequences and insane things taking place. I love that this movie exists. Now, I don't fully love this movie. I think it's very good, but I don't fully love it. And I think some of that's because I love the aesthetic, the direction, the style, the energy, more so than the plot and the script of the story. I love the aesthetic of the movie. I hope that we get more live action movies like this. And even as you look back over the last decade, it almost seems a little bit like animation and the Lord and Miller stream of animation in particular might have even taken some inspiration from this film in the way that they kind of visualize their animated films with the words on the screen, that's visual onomatopoeia times, and then just the aesthetic, the hyperactive nature of it. All of that, you start to see that first with Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. And so this is one of his movies that was kind of a flop when it came to the box office, largely because of its budget. But everyone that's seen it loves it. And I think it's had a lot more influence than it immediately gets credit for. In third place, Hot Fuzz, the second film in the Cornetto trilogy, and just this great love letter to classic action films, as well as a send-up of those films. It's a movie from someone that watched way too many action films and wanted to have fun with all of the tropes, all of the ideas, and it squishes them into one film and plays it out in such a clever, funny, and when it gets to the action sequences, exciting way. As always with Edgar Wright films, the cast here is great. In particular, I love seeing Timothy Dalton show up in the film. And these are just, this movie, as well as all the Cornetto trilogy, they're films that the more you understand the influences that led them into existence, the more you get out of them. So as an action fan, there's just so much in here that's so fun to watch, as it's these deep cut references in a bunch of different ways to the films I grew up watching. Now, I think in the past, I might have had this one up higher up on my list. Rewatching it, I think maybe it's a little bit too long. Takes a little bit too long until we get into the action being more overt. When it happens, of course, it's great. But there's quite a bit of spending time in the city and simplistic kind of things before the action really kicks in. And I think could have been tightened up just a little bit and move at a faster pace to deliver the goods at a more ready pace. Real quick before I give you my top two, remember to share your list down below in the comment section. My list isn't the right list, it's just my list, and I would love to see yours. Also, I've done a bunch of these director rankings in the past. You can check them out right up here in this playlist. Tarantino, Nolan, Fincher, Shyamalan, as well as like 15 others. They're right up here if you want to hear more videos just like this one. Our runner-up, Shaun of the Dead. Edgar Wright's original film that had a budget is still one of his best. And the reason that it works is that it just finds a way to combine this sort of rom-com story about this guy that's a loser who's just kind of slowly going through life like a zombie with the actual zombie genre, and it syncs them together flawlessly, where at the beginning it works just as that rom-com or as the setup for our zombie movie, and then once both movies are taking place, all of it just intertwines perfectly to have proper setup, payoff, proper motivation for our character to make certain actions, make certain changes in life, while each of the two stories functions in a certain sense as a metaphor for the other that just makes for a movie that was a clever idea, that was executed properly, that works holistically, well thought out from beginning to end and as a whole. And the reason it works, of course, is that you have a great cast here of fun characters from fun actors, but at the same time, Edgar Wright knows how to deliver on both sides to it. When it's a comedy with a little romance in there, it's funny, and you buy into their dynamics and the drama between them. And when skulls are being crushed in and arrows are being shot through faces, it also works as a zombie story with good zombie action. And Edgar Wright understands all of the genres that he's pulling in together to be able to make this cohesive whole that homages films while doing its own fresh original thing. And so it's not just a good send-up of zombie movies, it's just a good zombie movie, but it's also a good comedy, and it's also a good rom-com all in one. But coming in first place is Baby Driver, and in a lot of ways, this is probably his most conventional film. It is kind of a classic story about a getaway driver doing a bunch of heists, and he's the reluctant criminal that wants to get out because he's found love. That's kind of one of these plot lines that we've seen before, but we've never seen it like this before. It's a great example of how execution can elevate a familiar premise. So much of that is that Edgar Wright just incorporated music throughout the entire film. It's built into the nature of the baby character that he listens to music because of kind of his ear situation, that he goes into action, it gives him the tempo to do what he's trying to do, and then the movie is shot and edited to sync up with the soundtrack, which is the sort of thing that, like, it's that big picture vision that Edgar Wright has always had of he knows what he's seen the movie in his head, therefore he can shoot the film that he wants and incorporate a bunch of different things into that vision, and staged all of this to line up with the soundtrack that he'd already selected in advance, and it just makes for sequences that have a very specific dynamic to them. Other big reason that it works is because you actually care about the characters. Whether you're talking about Baby at the center of it, as this guy that has a good heart, found himself in a bad situation, he's trying to get out of it, and he wants to take a girl with him, or just this lively set of side characters that kind of come and go, all played by big charismatic movie stars that are designed to be big, fun, and flashy whenever they're on the screen. So Baby's a little bit more withdrawn, but you like him and you like the adventure that he's on. And then it's all these other characters that add the spice on top of it that makes this movie so flavorful. And it's a great, great example of how a director with a clear vision can take a familiar premise and make something awesome out of it. And then I think the 4 years since this movie has come out, without question, this is the Edgar Wright movie that gets put on in my household the most. So it comes in at number 1. If you enjoyed this video, I've got more like it right over there in that playlist. I've ranked the Tarantino, the Nolan, the Fincher, the Shyamalans, the Favreaus, all of their movies ranked right over there. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies too much.